Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight is Myth and Tarot. And so this is where I introduce you to a creature from Myth, and then we will go over a basic tarot reading for this creature as if they were sitting across the table from me in a live reading. So tonight I would like to introduce you to this little porcupine looking anteater. It's this little guy here. Oh wait, no, this one is a cute creature, a little bit weird, but that's not who we're talking about. That one's a little bit too real for what we're talking about. This, I believe, here we go. This is who we're talking about. We're journeying into the eldritch darkness of ancient Greek myth and lore to look at who is lovingly referred to as the mother of monsters. That is Echidna. And I've looked up a couple ways to say her name. That's the easiest one for me, so we're going with that. I've mentioned her in a few stories that I've talked about different creatures so far, but let's do a little deeper dive into this monster that births nightmares. So, Echidna is a monster who is, as you saw in the picture, half woman and half snake. She is said to live in a cave near the sea. It's one of the places that she lives. As we go along, you'll find out that that's not the only place that she lives. Her mate, the father of all monsters, was Typhon, and we'll talk about him another day because his myths go beyond Egypt. We'll just say that. Or beyond Egypt. He goes to Egypt. He's beyond Greek. Some stories have her living in a cave beneath the secret parts of the earth, far below the deathless gods and the lands of mortal men. And I loved that phrasing. It is said that she was basically banished there. The exact wording was, God's appointed location for her abode. And the gods that they are referencing in that point are the Olympian gods. Yeah, we'll get into those guys too. The place that she was appointed to is named Arima. It is called the Couch of Typhon. It's referenced actually in Homer's Iliad as well. Again, working this connection of Echidna to Typhon. No exact modern location is fully attributed to this place of Arima. A geographer in 20 AD suggested the location could be one of the following. This is how unknown her home was. One is Cilicia, one is Syria. There's another place that could possibly be there in Lydia, or Ischia. I may be messing that last one up. More modern ideas attribute her home to the Corician cave in the mountains of Cilicia, which is the home of Typhon and Echidna, supposedly in modern times. But like I said, when we get a little further into this, you'll find out that she doesn't have a set home, not in the way that we would assume. A fun legend is about the land of Arima. Arima is inside of a volcanic plain on the Gadiz River. This plain is between the lands of Lydia, Phrygia, and Mysia. In the area of Bozdag, and I may be murdering some of these names. I tried really hard, but it's not easy when you're trying to basically learn a new language. And Sardis. Oddly enough, this particular place is also a very fertile land by the name of Hyde. Sorry, IRL. I apologize. IRL has to be dealt with real quick because it's part of the day job. Do, 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 do. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, so this land is named Hyde, and how would you say anywhere these monsters live is fertile, first of all, and second of all, having a land where an ancient eldritch god lived, go by the name of Hyde, like it's the best place to hide your monstrousness. So, my life has been exceptionally interesting lately with timing, so, we'll keep pushing forward here. Hesiod's lore about Echidna seems to be the oldest that I could find. There are some fragments that were poking around in some of the historical record, but no one was really attributed to them. But Hesiod's is by far the oldest, more complete set of information. And he implies that Echidna was born to the sea goddess Ceto, or I had this down. Caliro. If it was Caliro, then Echidna's line is that of the Gorgons, Medusa's family tree. That's special. In that line, if Caliro was the mother, then her father would have been Chrysaor, Medusa's own son. So literally, she would have been Medusa's child. That's a terrifying lineage when you really study into Medusa herself in particular, but the Gorgons in general. They were not pleasant creatures. But if Ceto is the mother, then Phorcys is the sea god father. Later myths would name a father and no mother. The father would also just be Phorcys by himself. And that is one set of parentage. As with all of the ancient eldritch deities, knowing who their parents were was tricky. A later myth would say that Styx, the goddess of the river Styx, in basically hell, was the mother, and the father was Pereus, and that would have been one set of parents. One story, and I found this one referenced a lot, so I'm not sure if this was just popular in today's culture, but it didn't go. It was like around a couple hundred BC was where this one showed up at. The oldest one that I found literally was Hesiod's, but again, the names were a little hickey there. But one of the more modernly referenced stories, and I have to say I kind of like this one just because it puts a different spin on Echidna's position within Greek myth, and that one is her parentage is the father is Tartarus, which is basically the god or the titan that commanded the underworld well before Hades was even a thought, and Gaia being her mother. This one is a little bit interesting in the fact that Gaia, by her nature, even in the Titan lore, being a mother to such a monster is a little bit on the weird side. Some of the older myths put things a little bit different. As in Hesiod's myths, Echidna was seen as having a very beautiful and quite alluring woman upper body from about the waist up. She was seen as voluptuous and could literally stop a man dead in his tracks with her beauty. That's impressive. The lower half, though, not so pleasant. Apparently her lower half was known to be exceptionally large, adding to nightmare fuel here. And I mean large as in long. Like her coiling snake other part would, like from her waist down, could fill a room easily and still have bits and pieces coiled out of the room. I mean, she was massive bodied. And It would also be said that she was a flesh-eating monster or of goddesses. That's kind of terrifying, that she eats. she would eat divinity. Due to her fearsome nature, Echidna is neither like men nor the gods, so she had to carve out her own path in life. Of course she did. There is a view that she held the eyes of a nymph with a seductive cheek, meaning exceptionally beautiful, and her snake side was said to be speckled or blotched. So it wasn't just like black coils, it was kind of like oil moving, which has some beauty to it in a way, but also is horrifying at the same time. The Greeks liked to mess with people, especially if they were making something terrifying. Some would read Hesiod's view as she had the snake head on... Well, sorry. I have it written correctly, I just can't talk today. Some would read Hesiod's view that she had a head of a beautiful woman on a snake's body, or that she had a secondary head at the other end of that ridiculously long snake abdomen. Just trying to make things worse for those who want to sleep peacefully. She's got a beautiful upper body, or at least a beautiful head, this ridiculously long, oily, snake slithering, writhing body. But at the other end of that snake body, there's a venomous little mouth that bites everything. So, have some of the images. As I was researching this, I'm not a fan of snakes. I'm getting better about reading about them, but reading her description didn't do much for my sleep. I can deal with Medusa and her snake hair, but the oily, greasy, long, humongous snake body that Echidna has, I'm good. A later myth would suggest that Echidna had hundreds of snake heads that came off of that part of her body, but that's more of her partner, husband, Typhon's thing. She generally is depicted as just being one gigantic snake-bodied woman. An Orphic legend would say that Echidna was a beautiful... This is part of a branch off of the Hesiod myth. This was where it's just from here up, beautiful woman, long, gorgeous, jet black hair, and from here down was the snake. But this is a more modern, still 2,000 years old, story of hers. The original one had her upper body being a woman. It was also suggested, and this is where the emphasis came in on the Orphic legends, is that she was venomous. So she could bite you with the beautiful face and inject venom, or wherever the other end of her was, that end could bite you and inject venom. She just keeps sounding better and better, doesn't she? The only immortal monster that could mate with this exceptional beauty that was Echidna would be the nightmare god Typhon. And I use the term god because there's not another way to describe these two creatures. They were older than the Olympians by millennia, so it's lower states. So would they be called gods because they were supernatural, or were they just immortals? We'll get to that. And this particular pairing of Echidna and Typhon would be very fertile, and I mean very fertile. But their fertility wasn't really any better than them. She birthed monsters, giving her name. Echidna's first offspring was the two-headed dog Orthus, who guarded Geryon's cattle. Her most famous child, we all heard about him. There's comics all over the interwebs about this one. And he even makes an appearance in Harry Potter. And that one is Cerberus, the guardian of Hades, and the deity Hades' pet. Next one I've already talked about, and that was the Lernaean Hydra, again with the snake theme. I mean, really. Echidna was said to be the mother of the Chimera as well. Spoke about that one earlier. And the Greeks would attribute the Sphinx to Echidna's line, but the story of the Sphinx is so much older than the Greeks. It predates the Egyptians. Some Sphinx lore goes beyond and before the Sumerians, which is one of the oldest known people. We'll get into the Sphinx later, but these are some of the things that have been attributed to her. Unfortunately, the Sphinx is not applicable in this instance. The other of her children is the Nemean lion, again. It's almost like the Olympian gods hated her and her kids a lot, because most of them had been killed by Hercules at this point. Another of the monsters from the Greek myths would be the Caucasian eagle. If this one's new to you, I didn't realize it had a name, and I've read a lot about this myth, so I'm confused by this. This is the eagle, the massive eagle that kind of inspired a lot of the eagles in sword and sorcery novels in the last 100 years. But this is the eagle who would appear every morning at Prometheus's side to devour his liver in the most painful fashion, and then fly away, allowing Prometheus's liver to regrow, and then he would return the next morning to remove said liver again. The ancient Greeks had this thing with pain and gore, and we'll get into Prometheus' story later, because it is a fascinating one. Prometheus actually liked us little skin suits. Not something you can say about most of the Olympians. Echidna did, birth some real gentle children. Hope no kid I ever have is anywhere near this as gentle as Echidna's. At one point, Echidna and her spouse would storm Mount Olympus. I did not know this part of lore. This is something I found out just recently as I was researching her. And the reason they stormed Mount Olympus, because Echidna was a little bit, mama bear attitude, we'll go with that, towards Zeus, because of so many of her children being killed by him and his offspring. The rage and terror that went before this particular power couple shook the foundations of the Olympians and Mount Olympus itself, and almost all of the deities fled to the farthest reaches of the world, not just Greece, the world, to escape the wrath of these ancient monstrosities. There were several that would go to Egypt and change their names to be integrated into the Egyptian pantheon. There were other ones that fled to the east to the realm of the mystics. There were others that fled across the great seas, probably the Atlantic Ocean if we're going to be literal interpretations here. But Zeus would not leave. I will not give up Olympus. I can just about hear him standing there on the mountaintop screaming at them. The Greek myths would, of course, make Zeus the hero. He was the great hero that conquered the Titans and all the rest of that. But Zeus paid a hefty price for this particular championship. He did win, but he didn't actually win in the way he normally would. He couldn't kill either of these beings. They were immortals. They were older than him. Just like he couldn't kill the Titans, he could imprison them, but he couldn't kill them. He couldn't kill Typhon or Echidna. He would be able to basically knock out Typhon for a temporary time, and then he would drop Mount Etna on top of him. Some stories say he would put him into a deep sleep and buried him beneath Mount Etna. Either way, the lore states that the mountain rumbles with Typhon's fury even today. Personally, would not go digging around on that mountain, just personal opinion there. Zeus, though, and this one is weird because when you study much into Zeus and the Hera and that chaos, he's not known to be very sympathetic to anyone beyond older than the Olympians. He just wasn't. He was pretty hostile towards them most of the time. But this is a weirdly sympathetic act that Zeus performs at this point with Echidna. he would leave Echidna free to roam as long as she didn't attack Mount Olympus. And in her sorrow and her rage, she would accept these terms, but she would not roam the land of man. She would sink beneath the realm of Tartarus to wait in her lair for her time to rise again. Cheery thought. Later, they would add the dragon Ladon and the... oh, good grief. This is another one I tried practicing at this. Chromionian Sow to this list of her children, and this was after the storming of Olympus. And later they would add the Cochlean dragons as well. The Cochlean dragons are some of the more common ones you'll see on crests in Britain, London, Europe in general. So even though she was still in mourning and her husband was apparently buried under a mountain, she still produced progeny. I mean, if she's anything like some of the other monstrous Eldritch horrors, she could probably procreate off of one breeding for a while. If you want a good image, watch the Alien movie, the second 1 and 2, the old school ones. You'll get kind of an idea. It was one breeding, and all of a sudden she could produce eggs for years. And that was kind of this situation. There is some lore that makes Echidna way older than the Olympians. And from my research and kind of how I've come to understand her, again, you can only bury yourself into this for so long before you start feeling like you know these beings, and she's one that I feel like I kind of know at this point. It is said that she was older than the Olympians and far older than even the Titans, which puts her parentage of Tartarus and Gaia under question as well. In this particular line of myths, she births a venom-spitting son, which this is a great one too, with snake-like feet. We're really getting into the Eldritch horrors here. And a massive-sized gelatinous body. Lovecraft probably got some inspiration from this. This son would be the primary ally of Kronos in the war against Zeus and the Olympians. So this particular son would be trapped in Tartarus, where Kronos and the rest of the Titan families were sealed. This son, according to some later lore, would be killed by Ares, but in the originals he was actually imprisoned with Kronos. Echidna's children would even be referenced in the great epic of Troy. This was a little interesting to me. The Quintus Semurnius, who would attack the Trojan priest in Lacoon, and this would be another child of Echidna's. There's also one named Cilia in another myth. The list of offspring attributed to Echidna is actually really impressive, considering where she started, but also horrifying. None of her children were normal. And there's one, we'll get to that in a second, but there's literally one out of the list of them that I found that is even remotely not horrifying by sight. The main lore is that Echidna was immortal. I mean, she was older than the Titans, of course she's immortal. So, that lore states she's still sleeping soundly somewhere in the world today, below Tartarus, wherever that is. And if you look at some of the Greek myths, they think they have at some point found the gates to Tartarus. I don't recommend going there. That's just, I like lore, so... And everything has some grain of truth to it, so who knows what you would find if you did go digging around there. There is a side to the story, and I don't agree with this one. This was another way of the Greeks trying to cope with the fact that there was this type of being maybe out there. But this side story says that Hera, she's such a pleasant woman, sent a monster of her own to end Echidna. Please. Hera tried to kill Hercules by herself for years and never could complete that. This little mortal, or this little an Olympian deity is going to send off anything to take out Echidna, good luck. Supposedly, according to that lore, the monster that Hera had created, notice the phrasing, she sent after and put Echidna to sleep and slew her in her sleep. This thing is older than the Titans, and even Zeus couldn't kill Kronos. No, sorry. You might have put him to bed, you might have knocked her out, but she didn't kill her. More than likely, Hera said that just to make herself sound better, that she did something Zeus couldn't do. Yeah, so, anyway. I've done a lot of research into this power couple of Zeus and Hera, and I'll tell you, I don't like Zeus for a lot of the things that he did, but he had a reason. If you were married to someone like Hera, anyway, we'll discuss them later, because they are an interesting dynamic, and I may just do that as a one-off and do both of them together. I haven't quite decided on that yet. Other lore surrounding Echidna includes a story from Herodotus. He would claim that Echidna is the mother of the Scythian people. Not sure how to think about this one, but this is where the normal child comes in. This particular vein of thought has Hercules sleeping with Echidna, cheating on Typhon and hoping he didn't kill him, and from that copulation she would birth 3 children. The youngest child was named Scythes, and it was to this child that she would leave her earthly kingdom, because she had a very large kingdom at this point. And of course, Hercules put trials on all 3 children, and whichever one came out on top was the one that would get his lineage, and she would bequeath her throne to her mortal throne. And that child was the youngest of the 3, and that was Scythes, and that created the Scythian people, the Greek gods, and their interesting stories. In one of the apocryphal texts, now this this one made me giggle probably more than it should have, just because of what the heck kind of feeling. But I was going through some of the more obscure references of Echidna to find this. In one of the apocryphal texts, so these were books that were left out of the modern day Holy Bible canon. They're still in older versions, just not in anything after about 600 AD or so. There's a book in the apocryphal texts called the Acts of Philip. And it was said that Philip cast a half serpent, half stunningly beautiful woman creature into the abyss. Kind of sounds like Echidna. This creature was called the Mother of Serpents and Monsters. Where have we heard a name like that before? And to me, this sounds like Echidna. And so did others through time assume that this was speaking of Echidna. Philip was basically puffing himself up, saying he slew an ancient Greek monster. But he didn't actually kill it, he just cast it into the abyss. The abyss is the underworld. So he's kind of taking on the role of Zeus, in a sense, casting it down into the depths. And the funny part about this is, this particular reference to the half-serpent, half-woman creature being cast into the abyss was one of the things that actually almost kept this book in the Bible. There was a few other things I couldn't find out exactly what. There's a lot of when you start getting into the apocryphal texts, it's interesting how one little word or phrase got the entire thing kicked out. This wasn't what kicked out the Acts of Philip. So Echidna, in her most horrendous form, almost made it into the biblical canon. Didn't see that one coming, did ya? So there's been a lot of lore around these creatures. In modern day mystic terms, Echidna is not seen as a deity, although by her own right and authority and her age, there's no reason you couldn't see her as that. I don't recommend working with eldritch deities just as a safety precaution. But if you see her in dreams, because she does still manifest in dreams, she can be seen as the symbol of the dark and the dangerous parts of nature and of life in general. She can also be seen as a primordial energy of chaos and disorder. So if life's really being weird and you start seeing dreams, it's probably her saying, yo, we got to figure some things out. Your life's more chaotic than mine is. She can show the beauty and the horror of a nightmare, which, if you ever have read Lovecraft's work, it makes sense with under that perspective, combining all the elements of nature into its most awesome and terrifying forms. With respect to her abode, she can also be seen as the dangerous and mysterious aspects of the unknown and the secret. And, thinking about that, are you sure you want to look into that cave? Do you really want to move that rock and see what's underneath it? Might want to think twice after, checking out this episode anyway. What is interesting to me about Echidna in the myths is that she was never fully honored as a deity. Even the Titans were referenced as divine, in a sense, in the fact that they were godlike. She is older, or at least on par, with the power of the Titans. So is Typhon. Neither of which are super worshipped in that respect. She is way older and more powerful than any of the Olympians individually or in groups, and yet she is relegated to the realm of monster or eldritch horror, depending on who you're reading from. So, if you've ever heard of Echidna, other than here, or if you've ever done any research on her, let me know in the comments or in the chat if you're live. Because this creature right here, she didn't ever have 4 arms. This is our artist representation. And what's interesting is her story has almost been erased as far as images from almost all Greek stuff. There's a couple of pots that I found, nothing that was really clear the way the photos were taken. But there was nothing really left other than the stories. And to me, that's kind of sad. There was multiple images of Typhon that I found, but not so much of Echidna. She was kind of the odd creature out, and it had nothing to do with misogyny or any of that nonsense, because the Greeks honored the women as much as they did the men in a lot of the divine aspects. I mean, we still talk about Gaia today, so there's it wasn't something like that. But I feel like she almost wanted her story to be hidden, to be more secretive. I don't think she wanted everyone to know who she was. And I don't think this has anything, it's nothing more in that aspect than she was just, after so many of her children had been offed by Zeus and his child, I don't think she wanted to deal with it anymore. So in her mind, the easiest aspect was to disappear. And that's kind of how I feel that she actually processed her life after the Great Wars with Olympus, was that she just decided enough's enough, I'm going into reclusion. But when you're something that is that primal, that powerful, that beyond the normal, that doesn't just disappear. That doesn't just go away. The reason we have the myths is in a lot of ways you can see them as lessons or as something you can learn from. With her, when you first look at it, it's unclear what you could learn. It's unclear what she could teach. But in the reality is, the love of a mother, no matter what the child is like, is ironclad. It takes a lot for a mother to walk away from their child, and if nothing else, Echidna can prove that. She went to literally war over the loss of her children. The big thing that you can take away from that aspect of her is the love of a parent is a different form of connection and not to use the word again, but love than anything else. She, in one battle, she'd lost most of her children, horrifying to start with, but also lost her partner because Zeus was, well, Zeus. And that kind of grief is crippling. And so there's some things like that you can look at is how would you process something similar? Not to dwell on it, but like things can always be worse, even if you're not a deity, even if you're not an Eldritch horror. Things can be worse. I mean, so how can you find something to be positive? How can you look forward, putting order to the chaos, clearing out the nightmares, understanding that sometimes the secrets are the most powerful things. Those mysterious unknowns can actually teach you a lot if you choose to look at them. But we won't get too far into that. Just some thoughts that I had as I was researching Echidna. Like I said, by the end of this researching her, and other ones I've had similar, like, oh, you get to know something a little bit better. With hers, there was an underlying, I mean, she was what she was, but there was an underlying sadness through her life. She birthed her children and she did care about them very deeply, but they just kept getting killed. And it was over the stupidest things. One of them just happened to be the guard dog for some cattle, and Hercules was like, yeah, you're done. The Hydra, which was a disgusting creature unto itself, but again, it was just hanging out in the swamp. All of these little things, and when you look at it from that perspective, did she have any other option but to go after Zeus and the Olympian deities? Not really. I mean, she was done. She'd lost too much at that point. And as life will do, she learned there's always more to lose. So, hopefully in her dream state now, she's at least not as miserable, hopefully. But let's find out what the tarot has to say for her. So, the Significator card, her card, and I'm just using the basic Celtic cross spread. And if you're interested in any of the cards I'm using, you can find the link in the description. And I also found a couple of, because there's not, like I said, there's not a lot of imagery about her. There's not even statues. There's like one or two little books, and I haven't vetted them, so I didn't put those in there. But there's a couple of there's a t-shirt, and then there's also a hoodie that's like 80s retro type thing that looked really cool. So I'll put those in the description if you're interested. And clicking through those links just helps support the channel. So, but her significator is the number 10 in the major arcana. It's the wheel. And this is just saying that there's cycles in life. Everything happens for a reason. There's ups, there's downs, and as you can tell, there's blind. Meaning you don't know where you're at any point on that wheel. You could be just having a good day, but you may be on the bottom slope down here. Or you could be having a rough day, but you're on the top of the world. You don't know. That's the reason you have a blindfold on. And that's where she's at right now. Echidna doesn't know what's going on as far as life. She's an immortal. Sleeping for 2,000 years is like a nap for most of us. So she's just in her dream state right now. She's not really sure how she feels. The grief that she's had to deal with in her life is not pleasant, so she is struggling with that. But she's having dreams. She's still connected, oddly enough, to the race of human because she's on the same planet as us. But she's not really understanding what we are in fullness. I mean, she sees us, but she's not really sure. And that's where that concept of the wheel, things change, things grow. And the moment we're in a spiritual awakening, so we're turning back to looking for the ancient knowledge. And this is where she actually could rise again. But hopefully not. But you never know. And the thing that's crossing her is, this is kind of like her primary challenge, is the Two of Wands. It's that naivety of, if I do this again, things will just automatically be better, right? And that's not actually the case. When you're working with powers and energies like that, there's no guarantees, and that's the part that she's a little bit naive on, is she knows when she wakes up, things will be better. It'll all just be a bad dream. Zeus didn't send people out to kill her children. She's going to be in a better place. But that's that naivety, and it's a passionate wanting to hide from the reality, and that's the energy that's coming as the crossing energy here. Her higher influence, her higher mind, is the Ten of Swords. She's fought her battles. The truth is there. She knows the truth. And her higher self, her higher consciousness, is really saying, honey, you can try to hide behind that naive dream that everything that happened was just that, a dream. It didn't. The Ten of Swords is really saying, cut away the illusions. You've already been there. You've already done that. You've completed that cycle. The wheel continues to turn. Now it's time to move forward. This is no longer a time to look into the past and worry about what was, because she is what she is. She could still bear children. Not sure if that's a good thing or not, but she could still, fix some of the issues that happened in the past. And in the current time, the Olympians aren't here anymore. So, she's got some other options if she chose. Not in our favor, but you never know. The Six of Swords is her subconscious mind, her shadow self, so to speak. And it's this urge of, I want to get away. It's escapism is what I'm hearing. And that's something that she is still doing. Her subconscious, her shadow is saying, you don't want to go back. You want to stay here. It's quiet. It's safe. You're below Tartarus. You get to hear them scream every now and then. But you don't have to interact. When you're asleep, you're numb. You don't have to experience all of that. So she's really, her higher self is saying, girl, get it together. We got things to do. Wake up. Move on. But her shadow is really feeding into that naivety of, oh, just stay here. It's quiet. It's dreamlike. You don't want to go out there in the world. Ew. Like, stay here. Stay quiet. So she's got a little bit of a battle, is what it's looking like here. Her immediate history, so being an immortal, we'll go back 2,000 years, is the King of Wands. This is that fiery passion. She's burnt herself out. She's been there. She's done that. She's completed it. Her passions have peaked. They've washed out. There was some sustaining energy until her spouse was buried under a mountain. So now she's just done in her history. Her past, the fires raged to their fullest extent. Her passion, her life, everything was going so, for her, great. Then it didn't. The cycle has reached its conclusion, so her fire's kind of burnt out, is the history here. Now, going forward, the next 2,000 years, we have the Seven of Swords. Her future is all swords. Her history is almost all wands. That's interesting. But her future, next 2,000 years, to the millennia, is the Seven of Swords. She's not putting a lot of effort into her future. She's reaching for it, but she's also holding on to the past. She's reaching forward, but she's holding on to the past. And this indicates that even though things are looking a little bit better in her future, she doesn't want to let go of her history, her emotional past. And as a mother, she's never going to. She's going to carry around that weight of what had happened for the rest of eternity, because she's an immortal, and that's that part of like carrying it forward. But she is reaching, she is looking, doing some examinations, maybe popping back up and seeing what happens, but she's not going to put a lot of forward effort into it. She's going to kind of go with the flow on this one. So her attitude at life in general right now is the Five of Chalices. She's broken. The Five of Chalices, she's focusing here. She's not paying attention to the other chalices that are around her, above her, behind her, that are still in one piece. She is so focused on the loss of her children that she cannot and does not want to move forward. She does not want to step back into the modern time. She wants to be able to hold her Cerberus, and she wants to hold the first child. I just lost its name. Anyway, but she wants to go back and be with her children. Does not want to ignore or forget. She never will. But that's kind of where her attitude is right now. She is in her dreams. They're still alive with her, and that's why she doesn't want to wake up. The environment that she's currently residing in, is number 21, the world. So she's literally living beneath our feet. And I mean, in a literal interpretation of this card, but she's also, her environment is her everything. Like, she doesn't really know anything beyond now where she's at. She dreams, and she's, she'll connect in with humans, but our minds can barely comprehend something as ancient as her. So her entire world, her entire universe has literally went to that cave, the Aramea cave underneath Tartarus. That's where she exists. That's her environment. She hasn't left that cave in probably 2,500 years. She has no reason to. She has no interest in it yet. So hopefully she kind of stays there if we're going by what she's done in the past. But for her personally, she doesn't know anything different. That's where she knows. Her hopes and her fears, we have the Queen of Chalices. And I don't know why, because this picture does not have this in it, but she is scared of being bound. She is technically bound under earth, but she can move mountains if she needs to. But her hope is moving forward. Her hope is in an emotional clarity, healing those wounds, but her fear is being bound. Right now, she is technically bound, but it's by choice. She chose to go there and seal herself off from the world, but I'm just getting that real strong image of she's terrified of being restricted by others. Her doing it to herself is one thing, but she doesn't want to be restricted by someone else. And I'm getting the impression that that's what she feels Zeus did to her, so there's a little bit of anger still boiling towards the Olympians, but considering her history and what went on with her life, that's not surprising. The overall outcome of this, though, is the Eight of Chalices. Oh, got a little one, have to hide there. And this card is really saying the emotions are going to be up and down. You're never going to fully be away from those emotions. The Eight of Chalices, the Eight of Cups, this is the Eight of Water. This is the eternity of the ocean. That is the depth of feel that she carries with her. It's not something that she's going to be able to walk away from easily. This is not something that she's ever going to be able to truly move beyond. So this is unfortunately where she is right now in her state. The outcome of this reading is she is where she is, and she's not really willing to move on, because to move on is to admit and accept that her children are past and her husband's buried under a mountain in Greece somewhere. So, and those are things that she's just not willing to admit just yet. You can see in her immediate future, the next 2,000 years, there is a little bit of movement towards maybe accepting, maybe poking her head out, just kind of feeling things out a little bit, but it's still not something she's quite ready to do at this point. So, with that, we will wrap up this little video, or this episode. If you're new here, please drop a hit that subscribe button, drop a like on the video if you enjoyed this type of content, and let me know your thoughts. If Echidna is something you've ever heard of before, not the creature, I'll even put pictures up, not this guy, but this one. If this is something you've ever heard of before, if it's something completely new to you, and like I said, we'll talk about her spouse at a later date, but just because she birthed so many of the monsters I've already spoken of, let's go to the source type of a thing. So, with that, I will let you guys go. Have a great rest of your night, and I will see you in the next video. Stay safe and pleasant dreams.